Derek, dude, thanks for coming on today. Really happy to have you and just chat. We got to connect, recently, and just to set this up. But other than that, it's been a little while. So looking
Yeah.
forward to just kind of connecting.
Dude, I'm excited when we connected and then you invited me on here. It's hard to pass up, talk to someone that you already know, about something that you both love. It was a no brainer.
Yeah. So I think not everyone, but most people at least understand my narrative and some of the things that I'm doing. But for everyone listening, I think it could be important to let everyone know that you have a similar background. Like you had a passion for fitness. There's things that you're still doing. You just moved in a new direction. Let's give everyone like the bird's eye view, the elevator pitch, the around the world, about just where you came from, how we met. Let's just let everyone understand like the relationship here.
Okay. So I guess I do a quick 10,000 foot overview of my background, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll go back to the college days. So she's over 10 years ago now. It makes me feel old saying that. I got a scholarship to go play baseball at Long Island University. So it's a small Division I school in the Northeast. And there I studied exercise physiology. So that's how I kind of got into the fitness side, was training as an athlete. And then I was like, well, I can do this for a living. Like I can teach people how to do this and get paid decently for it. So I went that route and worked for a year in New York City as a personal trainer, Upper East Side. Got to work with some really cool people, some very wealthy individuals, lots of hedge fund people, things like that. After a year of that, I moved back to where I'm originally from, which is upstate New York, and started my own business. And I say that like air quotes business because it was, I don't know what to do and I need to try to generate just a little bit of income here or there. And so it was just like personal training on the side and just like a little bit of this and then like a little bit of baseball coaching and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And all of a sudden, like I started realizing I'm building up kind of a stable income with this personal training thing. Not a lot of money, but I remember when I made $3,000.
How old were you?
23, 22, 20. That was March of 2013. So I was 22.
So enough, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I just matched what I was getting paid, as a W-2 employee on my own. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. So I decided to kind of focus on that and made my first, $3,000-$4,000 a month. And I was like, oh, this is awesome, right? And really started kind of taking on more clients and taking that more seriously and looking at it as a business, not just like a little bit of a side hustle. And so that's what kind of my introductory to like the gym owners world is like actually building a business. We kind of pivoted off of the personal training and went into more of like semi-privates and the boot camp styles and started mixing it up, got a bigger building, got to purchase my own commercial property and build my gym inside of there. And
wait, you own the commercial property?
Yeah. Yep, I got a sweet deal on it, so I decided to buy it, and then so I owned the building.
You still own it?
I actually just sold it in December of last year, so December of 2022.
Wow, man, what a great move! I want to actually, maybe we could dig into that.
Sure.
There's so many things. Like let's loop back around. I don't want to distract because I just think that there's something really interesting about if you look at a lot of models, it could be outside of the fitness industry, but a lot of companies are like secretly real estate companies, and a lot of times that's what helps keep the business afloat and the door open, the lights on when all shit hits the fan and a business isn't operating at the same like level of success as the other like franchises or whatever the case is. You're looking at like furniture stores like Raymore and Flanagan, McDonald's. Everyone knows McDonald's, but like Raymore and Flanagan's another example. And I can name 4 or 5 more, but they're real estate companies first, right? I had like a paradigm shift when I had first learned about how some of this works. I think I was in college just looking for money, and I worked at Raymore and Flanagan, and in their training videos, like where they actually onboard you, teach you about the company, they sit you down and they go, oh, by the way, we're not a furniture company. We're a real estate company. So welcome to like the 3rd largest real estate company in the world. Don't quote me on the ranking, but they're one of the biggest, like next to McDonald's, and everyone just goes there for furniture, right? Like, so anyhow, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we can definitely kind of circle back to that because it definitely positioned the business differently because I owned it. I owned the property that we were operating off of. So I didn't have to deal with landlords or anything like that. But anyway, so we bought that commercial property and there's a fun story behind that as well in terms of how I came across it. But we grew. I mean, when we first moved into that building, I was excited to do $10,000 a month in revenue. And that was revenue. That wasn't like me taking home any of it. Like that's $10,000 a month with maybe like a 40-50% margin at that point. And came across this guy, this guru online that was Alex Hormozi, and decided to kind of take a shot at what he was offering for gym launch. This is the early stages of gym launches. And I remember getting into their Facebook group, and I was in the 80s in terms of the members. So I was one of the first like 80 people to invest into gym launch, and they've since served 4,500 or something like that. And so got in on like the really early floors of it. And we went from $10,000, $12,000 a month to like 50, 60, 70,000 a month in a matter of probably less than a year.
Were you guys running like the challenge plays that were being taught?
Yeah, that's when the challenge first was like really fresh to the market. And so I remember the first campaign that we ran, I spent a little over $300 in ad spend over 3 weeks to tell you how little you had to spend on Facebook at that time.
Yeah.
And we did over 30,000 in sales.
It's amazing. Man, shout out to Hormozi for like popularizing the challenge. I just talked to a buddy about this. He called me down, and he's in Fort Lauderdale, and he's like, we're talking about the challenge and how long it's been around and stuff. Every once in a while I get someone's like, what's it like to work with Hormozi? I was like, I have no idea. Like, I never even really interacted with him, and he's a different human now. It's not even the same guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Totally different.
So it's pretty interesting. But so that was great. So you had that level of success, and then you actually had eventually, clearly something happened. You worked at Gym Launch as you were a leader on the team when I worked there briefly as a coach, and you were teaching sales and all kinds of stuff. So what happened from you transitioning from there into working at Gym Launch?
Yeah. So they were asking about or looking for business coaches to come in and help other gym owners kind of scale their businesses, because I think Alex realized that the monster that he had built as one or two man crew, you know, between him, Layla, and maybe someone else jumping in, couldn't really fulfill all of the people that were now buying Gym Launch. So they were rapidly hiring coaches. And so I was like, yeah, that would be kind of fun. I just had my first kid. And so still doing the 3:30 wake ups. I was going to the gym early mornings. I had a couple hour break in the middle of the day that used to be a round of golf. Now it was going home to be with the kid and then going back to the gym in the evenings. And it was just kind of like that really stretched schedule. And they had this opportunity to work from home. You know, you have PTO, you get to be on Zoom, we get to pay you a nice salary, you get benefits, which as a business owner, you don't have, obviously, to pay for your own. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to take a shot. Kind of threw my hat in the ring there and got brought on board. So I was one of the first 2 coaches that they hired, and they ended up really overstaffing the coaching department. And within 90 days or so, 120 days, they really trimmed it back down. So I think they got up to like 30 coaches at one point. A lot of them were part-time. So it was one of those.
Not even like that now.
No. And it was one of those like, hey, we'll cover your Gym Launch dues if you just take a small roster. That was kind of the trade-off with the part-time coaches that they had.
Oh my God.
And I was full-time. I was one of like 2 or 3 full-time people that they actually hired. And they trimmed that down from like 30 or 32 down to 5. And so I made that cut and stayed on and continued to build the roster, which was a lot of fun. And then so I became lead of the coaching department there. This thing called COVID happened. I don't know if you remember it or not.
I try to forget about it.
I try to forget about it. So March 2020.
My wife. So actually, I don't know. You know, it's one of those things that's bittersweet.
It's a mental place, right?
Yeah.
So March 2020 happens, and people are closing down because they're being mandated to do so. And we come out saying, we have the solution to keep your business going. And so sales, the interest in Gym Launch was, they were just being crushed. So I get a call from Alex and says, can you go over sales? It's like, okay, sure. Like, I got B2C selling down. Like, I could sell fitness all day long. It can't be any different. I'm speaking to my people, right? And so went into the sales department and got crushed. Like, my first.
Let me ask you something on that though. So like, okay, you're transitioning in. You're about to say like your first probably month or something, right? Maybe it was really tough. In retrospect, do you think it's a lot different? Like, what are your feelings on that? I have a little bit of a theory behind it, but
on what particularly?
Yeah, like so you had the B2C experience and you're like, okay, this isn't going to be that bad. And then you got crushed. So do you, like, what do you think the differences are? And then how did you pivot? I know that you did, right? So
yeah, had to. Yeah, no choice. Yeah. So like I said, I was getting crushed. 2-3 weeks after transitioning over, the sales and marketing manager had a discussion with me, said, I can't justify keeping you on the team with this performance. I gave you 2 more weeks to figure it out, or we'll have to make a decision. So that put my back up against the wall. Now, the difference like between B2C and B2B, what I found is in the B2C environment, I was person to person. I wasn't over Zoom or over the phone. So I had a little bit more of emotional pull there, and it allowed me to be super empathetic and even sympathy sometimes. And it was a lot of hand holding, coaching, just making sure I'm very thorough, make sure they're feeling very comfortable. Because I'm selling the 43-year-old soccer mom who's wanting to lose her baby weight that she's had, air quotes, baby weight that she's had for the last 16 years.
Yeah.
And so trying to get her to feel comfortable to move forward was a lot different than talking to a gym owner who they're making $8, $12, $15,000 a month. And all of a sudden, like, their business is now in jeopardy of closing. So there's a lot more panic that's involved with that. And so I took that B2C approach and came in as like, hey, it's going to be fine. I was like very coaching on these calls, not closing. And so like, I would go through exactly what it is that we would need to do and provided all of this insight and all this information, think that I was coming across as the expert. And they're like, hey, you did a great job. I'll get back to you, which is like the first couple of weeks of doing this is they turned into coaching sessions. And I wasn't actually selling and closing people into the program.
Yeah. I think that that's like the biggest mistake too. And we learn that fast, like going into B2B, like if you haven't done that, it's just as much about digging into the pain and talking about the problem and focusing on their problem and how you're going to get the solution. The second you just start coaching, they don't feel the pain. They see all of the possible benefits and they're not sure if that's what they need. And if they're not sure that that's what they need, even though they're hearing some of the solution, they can't piece that together with the things that they're emotionally conflicted with, the reason that they went to the sales call. And that was something that I actually had to like really learn as well. When I first started doing B2B, I thought I could just consult people on the front side of things. And I was like, dude, what the fuck is going on with, I'm good at this and I know it, but I wasn't converting at the level that I thought I had to convert. And then I was like, well, let me just take the same framework that I use to a consumer. And I would get, now like so if the company I work with now, imagine like Gym Lunch for attorneys, we're the SMB team. So we do like the coaching, marketing, everything for attorneys, for law firms. And this is just a good example because for gym owners, I do think that it was a little bit easier for me to tap into that emotional state just because the nature of gym owners, it's brutal with attorneys, but we call it like, digging into the why, right?
Right.
Here we say it's the dominant buying motive. It's the same thing. You have to pull that 40-year-old soccer mom out of every business owner.
Yes. It's true. And it's there. So I think a lot of times in B2B, you think it's got to be more of a logical, no, that emotion is still there. If anything, it's higher once you hit it.
You have to gain the respect and authority to be able to get that from them, where if you're business to consumer and they're coming in for fitness, it's so easy to just dive right into the emotional piece. You have to, in my experience, what I've seen to be successful is obviously focus on the problem, learn a little bit about them, like continue to make it their narrative. In the very beginning, if you just talk about how great the company is or how great your solutions are, you're already dead in the water. I won't even actually go over that on the first call with people because I think it takes it off of their narrative and their story. And I think that's that journey of us making things feel like it's just for them the whole time is really what wins in a B2B environment. And once you've gained that respect, I used to lead with it, but now I end with it. I say, listen, I know that this sounds really silly, but I think in business, it's just not talked about enough. The things that you discussed with me, right? The challenges that you're facing. You're a business owner. You could you could work in a gym or you could work in a law firm or you can work in wherever, but you're not. And so I already know that it's just not true that you're just doing this because you want to make more money. Like, what is it that you want personally?
There's way more to it. Yeah.
Yeah. What is it that you want personally? And then I'll explain to you, just share what you're comfortable with, right? Don't just whatever you're comfortable with. And then I'll explain why I asked that after. And then they'll tell me whatever it is, as long as I did my job on that call, because a little bit of some nuggets blow their mind a little bit, but mainly just focusing on them, prying, because they're leading themselves to realize that they can't figure it out on their own. Once you can see that, that's when you can give them like little nuggets and blow their mind and be like, hey, this is a great call. We need to set up a second call with a solution.
Yes. Yep.
Right. And then after that happens, you go into the emotional connection, you tie them down to that emotion and then say, listen, the reason we're asking is because we really could care less about your business. And that sounds pretty harsh. And that's not really what I mean we do. At the end of the day, the way that our environment and culture at SMB, and you could do this at Gym Lunch, you could do this with your company now, which we'll talk about next. Whatever insert your company name is because we really just care about the people. Our job is not to grow the business. It's to give the life that the business owner wants back or what they haven't been able to achieve yet. And the reason why they started this in the first place. And it's like, when you tell them that, it doesn't matter what their reaction is. You know that they value it and they go into that next call feeling like they're really cared about as a person. And that drives that business to business sale. It's not just about the bottom line. No one cares about the bottom line if they're not going to get the life that they want.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you bring up a really awesome point with this too. And I think this is a major fault, if you will, or something that gets overlooked is when we're selling to somebody and we're asking and we're prying, the idea is obviously to get that emotional feeling to come up of like you said, realizing that they're not where they want to be. How can we help them achieve their desired outcome? But the problem is a lot of times people will ask really good questions and they'll start to get that pain, if you will, that bottleneck. And then they go, oh yeah, we can solve that. That's not a problem. We do it by X, Y, and Z. So let me ask you this. So you numb that feeling. Right. So you make them feel super comfortable. You're trying to extract this pain. And then you're like, yeah, but it's not that bad. Like we can help you with that. And so the emotion to move isn't as high because you're consistently basically putting a Band-Aid, on their cut. There's one thing that you kind of take away from this little discussion here. Don't numb the pain, like continue just to ask, be empathetic for sure. But you don't have to solve their problems in the moment. Just make it about them.
Absolutely. It's the same to consumer. Like I always use fitness as the analogy to why I sell the way I sell, or even to when I'm teaching other people how to sell business to business, right? When you have someone that's maybe that 40-year-old soccer mom and they're like, well, I've done this in the past and it didn't work. And you could say, oh, well, this is how it makes right away. Like you're saying, you could be that entry-level sales guy and you could tell them how right then and there, how you can solve that problem. And you think that you're avoiding objections at the end. Yep. But really what you should just do is acknowledge it. First step is acknowledgement. Yes. Second step is reassurance that we can fix it. But the third and most important step is to not explain right then and there how you do it. You just let them know, hey, we'll get to that later. I want to focus on how long you've been dealing with that and how many times and what the frustrations were that came out of trying it and not being successful. So you have to continue to go through their journey from a question-based standpoint. And it's not just to deliberately dig into the pain, but when they can see that you're asking better questions, they know that they're going to care. You're positioned more as an expert. It's like if you go to a physician, right? It's the same story. They're going to be really detailed because they have to be. And they're going to be like, wow, this is a completely different experience than I expected. What did I just walk into? Yeah. And when you're done with all of the discovery, you can then say, hey, all these things that you mentioned earlier, I just want to go through really briefly on how we attack this so you can understand how different it is. I told you earlier that, we can handle all this. And I wanted to just make sure that you were the perfect fit, because the reality of the situation is that we can't help everyone. And there's three things that we look for to make sure that we can. Number one is your mindset. I think that you're there. Number two is your determination. I think that you're there. And number three is that the goal that you're physically trying to achieve is something that we can accomplish. And it is. And so because of that, I feel really good about bringing you into the program. I love That's a position I take, right? And then they're like, okay, you're going to bring me into the program. And it's like, here's exactly how we handle this situation. And we dive right into that sales process and then go for the close. Business to business, I break it up to a second call, just personal preference. But it is interesting because you're right. You can't just tackle every objection with a solution. It's information overload. They lose the narrative of that story that helps them realize the problem solved because it's segmented in the conversation. It's more difficult for them to recollect what those solutions were in the conversation. It's more used, even if they're excited, and they can't make a decision on the spot. And so that's just one of the massive disconnects in sales is like, overcome all objections before the end. Sure, but not in that way. Well,
you can't go, it's not a 1-for-1 equation, right? You just can't hear it and try to knock it out. And so I think you bring up a good point is that when you're in the presentation side of things, information overload suppresses the pain, right? And so that pain is that motive, that reason for them, that catalyst for them to change. And all of a sudden we want to just, for some reason, vomit everything that we have to offer, how it all works, the colors of it. And, if it's fast, if it's slow, if it's up or it's down, and we want to share every little nuance. And then there's so much information that the solution kind of gets buried. The actual desired outcome gets buried, and it makes it extremely difficult for them to make a decision because now the reason for them to change is numb. And there's so much information that the actual solution that will get them there is kind of buried. And so it's really kind of making sure that we keep that presentation as short and as crisp as we possibly can, and making it focused on the outcome and directly tied to their pain. I actually just shot a reel, a TikTok, if you will, a little piece of content yesterday on finding the values and how you can sell somebody, right? And so you talked about overviewing their past experiences and saying, why didn't this work in the past? I think people overlook those type of questions because there is so much value, whether you're selling B2B or B2C, in those particular questions, because you say, cool, what did you try in the past to accomplish X? And they tell you, I've tried this, that, and the other, right? I tried A, B, and C. And then you go, well, did you find that successful? More than likely, you're going to say, No, because if they were successful, they wouldn't be there with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can ask them, well, what about that would you change if you could? If you had a magic wand, what do you think was missing for making you successful? They're going to tell you exactly what they find valuable.
Yeah.
They're going to say, well, if it had more one-on-one coaching or more detailed trainings, or if it had higher level of customer support or whatever it might be, that's what they find valuable, right? And so they're going to tell you what they liked about it and then what they would change, which is what they don't like about it.
That's right.
And all of a sudden you got your magic formula to present to their values.
That's so true. And one thing that drives me just like absolutely bonkers, like just nuts, is when you have some of these guys too, or girls, like any business owner, and yeah, you're asking these questions, but sometimes everyone, when you're in that initial discovery piece, because that's an early on phase, these types of questions, like, well, I can figure it out on my own. Like we're DIYers, like we do everything ourselves, and I know that we can do it. And it's like, okay, well, once you quantify how long they've been dealing with that, and you can explain that they believe they have the solution, and then by like the magic wand question, and then you ask them what stopped them from implementing it, and then they give you more objections on why they weren't able to, they just answer their own question that they actually don't have the ability to do it. Yep. And that's the thing, is it's not intentional. I actually don't believe that it is, but most people, they make things what they want because it's easier, right? It's easier to feel like you're out of control, or that you think you're in control when you're not. And so people always believe that they have the answers, that from an ego standpoint. And as soon as that light switches, you can almost see it in their face. Like the physical inflection of their body language and their voice. It's like the ego just melts off, and they're like, well, what would you do? And then initially I don't even give them the answers, even if I think I have it. I'm like, well, that's a really good question. I don't want to say anything without gathering more information, because there's no perhaps one way to fix everything. So let's get back to that. Do you mind if I just ask you a few more questions? Because then what you're doing is you're sitting on their side of the table by showing them some sense of vulnerability, that you're not a know-it-all. You know, it's so important to do that. And the truth is, if you don't gather more information, you might give the wrong solution. So there's a lot of truth to it. You're not just like doing it to do it. Man,
well, it's the same reason, like looking behind me, like I don't have like, Ty Lopez bookshelves, right? But I got some books behind me. And most of them are business or sales related books. And I bet you if you just studied one book over and over and over and over and over again and got really, really good at that context of that book, you might be successful. But the problem is, like, there's also the accountability to it as well. Like, I can buy a book for $10 and have access to the information, but it doesn't mean I'm implementing it.
Books give people motivation. Okay, this is like one of the things where like,
what it is. Like, I'm reading this book. I'm gonna learn more about this, and then they do nothing with it. They're motivated to read the book.
I want to read something that I just wrote yesterday. It's like so simple, but I don't want to butcher it. First off, you should absolutely read books, and you absolutely should implement the information that you genuinely believe is correct for your situation, and apply that to your life and your business. But two things. The first thing is that books can't be your motivation. The second thing is that every book that you read cannot be the new business plan, because you're going to change your business plan every month, and you're going to completely lose focus on what's right. And there's so many books that just conflict with each other. So you should read 2 or 3 books all on the same topic and see what the commonalities are and which commonalities apply to your business before you just jump the gun on which books apply to your business because everyone else is reading it and say that it's great. So, this is what I said, and this applies to books. This is why I wanted to read this, right? Because books motivate people. And so there was a book that I read a long time ago that I did like. It's called The Motivation Myth. And some of it is a little bit anecdotal, but there's a lot of truth to it. And so what I said yesterday goes something like this. It says, determination is the emotion, discipline is the function. Motivation is the emotion, but without the function. And you experience this in fitness when somebody comes in and they tell you time and time again that they've tried something and they weren't successful. And it's like, well, motivation is like that friend that throws you a good party but leaves before they have to clean up. Right. Discipline is the friend that says, hey, I can stay and help you do all these things, even if I can't make it to the party. And so when you can realize that you need to tell discipline or tell motivation, I didn't release this yet, but I wrote a letter to motivation. I wrote a letter to discipline. I thanked motivation for all of the fun, but how at the end of the day, it just leaves me with excitement and empty promises. And if you're in a weight loss journey, like you've tried it 1,000 times, right? You have to like really focus your friendships on the people that are reliable, which is discipline. And when you look at people that are determined, and I have my own anecdotes for this, like I'm a twin, and I used to think that I wasn't as smart as my brother. My brother is a biomedical engineer. His wife as well, like is in neuroscience. He's always been in the scientific community. He's absolutely brilliant. And I grew up thinking that I was not as smart. And here's the thing that I realized. realized. I would use motivation or people that seem motivated as a way for me to have like some false sense of outcome because it would give you a slight push. My brother was never motivated. And if the traditional sense of motivation would make you say, well, he's super motivated. No, he was fucking determined
and disciplined.
He didn't care if someone in our class got a better grade than him and he wasn't number one. He wasn't motivated by that. He was determined to be the best. And determination is the emotion for discipline, which is the function. It's why it works, because when you're determined, you will be disciplined. And motivation is that same false sense of effort or excitement that fades because there is no function. It's all temporary. And so when I thought about it, that's why I came up with that quote, is that like determination is the emotion to discipline. Discipline is the function. Motivation is the emotion without the function. And so you have to just realize that there's these two friends that you have inside of your brain that are always tugging you left and right. And it's not that motivation has all the bad things. It's like, hey, thanks for all the memories. But when you realize what actually creates significant outcomes, it's being determined and doing it at the times that you don't want to do it, doing it at the times where you're frustrated about it. And so it's super interesting to see because everyone reads a book and they're like, oh yeah, like let's go. Like this is going to be a game changer. Is it? Because right now you're motivated. You should probably detach from that idea for a second. Just detach from the book for like 90 days and then come back around to that idea and see if it still really makes sense for you. Right. So it's just interesting to see how people treat like the newest book that everybody reads. It's just like hang tight for a second. Let's make sure that you actually understand what it's doing. And then if you do think that it's the right fit, you better be friggin' determined, because if you're just motivated by the latest like book that's just going to persuade you to do something, you're not going to have any focus. There's no focus there. So it's just
I think that's a really big part too, right? Is that like people dive into multiple books at once, and then like there's no way that you can actually take and implement and do that on a consistent basis. And again, it's just more of a motivation, and it's cool, man. Like I love being educated. I love being informed. I love hearing new ways and challenging my current beliefs and all of that.
Yeah.
But there's a point of like the discipline and the determination to take and implement, which is why, again, when you talk to people, going back to the sales conversation, they're like, oh, I can figure it out on my own. Well, why haven't you? You have the information.
Dude,
and you know what? You can go on Google. You can go on YouTube. You can use ChatGPT. You can get any information that you're looking for, but you're not implementing it. Why?
Dude, my success was so delayed because I was motivated. I read so many books in college. I read so many books when I was out of college. I had to start an online supplement company, fail. Okay. I had the opportunity to open a gym with a friend of a friend who I'm still close with, who owns the gym, fail. Okay. It operates, but like I had to leave. Let's see. I had an online consulting company prior to working with Gym Launch, and I did, like, from a cash flow standpoint, was absolutely killing it. COVID hit, fail. And then I, it's just the way that it is. And there's other things that I did between then and all of that too. But you're looking at 3 or 4 business opportunities fail. And it wasn't the education, it wasn't the knowledge, and it wasn't the skill set. It was that I would get highly motivated. And then the second that some challenge came along, I was like, this is not right. Like maybe I made a mistake and I better get out now. And I'm just being honest about it. That's the complete difference of why my brother was always more successful academically than me, is because none of that mattered to him. He was determined. And I wasn't. I was motivated, and it delayed my success and gratification. It like multiplied the gap by like 100-fold. And as soon as I realized that I have to just put that behind and just figure out how to be more disciplined, I hate to just hit on discipline because everyone talks about it now, which is fine, but you really do just have to have like a high level of determination. Like how determined are you despite the setbacks and despite this and that? But yeah, I agree, man. I mean, there's so many books that I do like, so not to get lost in a tangent. What's your favorite like nonfiction book? Do you ever read nonfiction?
I can't get into it. I fall asleep. If you want to put me to sleep, I'll start reading a nonfiction book and I'll just start dozing within a couple pages. So I can't honestly answer that question.
I've only read a few, so it's tough for me. I like the book Life of Pi. So I read it leading up to it being a motion picture. Are you familiar with the movie?
Yeah. Yep.
It's a book about a kid who is a Christian Buddhist. What is he? He's a Christian Buddhist. It's been so long. I'm just blanking on the third religion here. Islam. He believes in Islam. He believes in Buddhism, and he believes in Catholicism. And his parents we're like, well, you can't believe in all three. And he's like, well, why not? He's like, I can believe in all three. And what he does is he goes on this journey with his family to go from India, where they own a zoo, to somewhere else. It's been such a long time now, so I vaguely remember this. And then he gets basically stranded on a boat with a tiger because they're like shipping these animals, and he gets removed from his family. And he takes all of the things that he learned from all three religions to keep his sanity on this lifeboat until he finally finds land, and he survives being on the boat with the tiger. And he has this elaborate story of all the crazy things that happen on the boat. And then when he finally gets found at shore and he's in the hospital, the doctors and his family, can you tell us everything that happened? And the story is so miraculous. The book's basically told from the bedside, essentially. Okay. Like at the end of the book, you realize this. And they were like, how can any of that possibly have been true? And he's like, I'll let that be up to you. And so he doesn't even say that any of it was true. And that's like, if you look at any religion, I don't care what anyone's religious belief is, it's just interesting that basically there's parables that have good stories. And it's like, let's just not care about arguing over what you believe in. Can you actually take the concepts from all of these things and see the good in the intention of it? Sometimes people use things for bad, but can you use the intention of good to have a narrative that will help everyone be better people, that will inspire people to be better? And it's just, I don't read a lot of fiction, so I can't say. There's probably way more fiction books, but I always go back to that story because I read it. It's got to be 10 years at this point, so I don't remember all of it. Such a crazy book. Because like he just hits you with the cliffhanger, right? Like I'll leave that up to you. And I just thought that was really interesting because,
well, what a way to end.
Oh yeah, dude. Crazy. Yeah. But I'm in the same boat. I can't read a lot of fiction. So I want to hear a little bit more about what you're doing now.
Yeah. So currently I am about entering month 6 here in a couple of weeks of
Are you motivated? No, I'm just kidding.
Super motivated, and that's it. That's all I'm focused on is my motivation.
Yeah.
I've launched what I'm calling Rapid Sales. So rapidsales.io is the website, and the focus is basically a B2B sales consulting and fractional management. So what I basically do is we come in, we focus on helping businesses understand their systems better. So we start with an audit. We can get into that details here in just a second. Mm-hmm. So we start with an external audit, then it shifts to an internal audit of processes, systems, team. What are we using in terms of CRMs and workflows and scripting and all that fun stuff. Then we go into a building phase where we are enhancing what they currently have, rebuilding, like imploding and rebuilding, or completely building from scratch if they don't have it, to make their sales department more efficient. And then we focus on scaling. And so that's just a lot of training and repetitions and making it simple and really trying to open up the gates of cash flow for the business so that they can be making more sales more efficiently, cut down on sales cycle time, things along those lines. So that's really my focus right now is on that project.
Yeah, I think it's essential. I have another gentleman that I was talking to recently, and he's like a HubSpot specialist. And he was talking about how he thinks that one of the big gaps that he sees in most businesses, whether it's like just below Fortune 500 companies and people with small businesses or the high ticket space, most of them don't have the processes in place in order to properly manage client pipelines. So yes, you have pipelines built and there's CRMs, but they're actually not utilized properly. And when they're not, there's things that you just can't do. Like you can't conduct like a win-loss analysis if you don't have all the data.
That's right.
Right. You can't effectively, like you think you know your closing percentage, but what's the closing percentage with the context behind it so you understand how to either reposition an avatar that may be better for your business.
Well, that's big.
Huge.
A lot of the stats in sales and acquisition don't have context.
And they're reported by your sales guys. Come on.
And they want to walk around.
I'm gonna give you all the information that's 100% like biased to me because yes.
I closed 73% of qualified opportunities. Meanwhile, he's hard qualifying every single person. So 3 out of the 4 people you speak to.
Marketing sucks. They're not doing their job, man.
No, it's always marketing's fault. Come on, man. It's always marketing's fault.
Yeah.
But no, you're 100% on the money. And it kind of cracks me up because I think one of the biggest bottlenecks or biggest gaps that I see in so many businesses is that their speed to communication, the quality of communication is poor. And then there is zero follow-up, like whatsoever. So it's a buy or die mentality. We'll follow up with them later. There is no follow-up and it's very half-assed if they do. And so they're leaving so much money on the table. I remember I came into one company and they said, we need to be better at closing this, that, and the other. And looking at their data, it's like, well, you're not awful. You're not superstars, but like you're reasonable to be where you need to be. Open up their CRM. They had $50 million worth of business in the pipeline that they weren't touching, just sitting there.
Yeah.
Not saying that they're going to close 100% of it.
Is that also in is that also in their lost opportunity, considering that's part of the pipeline, or is that like just people that they're working on?
So that was everybody in their pipeline, from leads that they weren't communicating with, that never scheduled a call with their sales team.
Oh my God.
And in their follow-up. So because their lead nurture stunk, so they weren't setting appointments and they weren't getting people to show up. So they had a bunch of no-shows, a bunch of unscheduled leads that showed interest, saying, I want to learn more about what you do. And then they didn't provide them the opportunity to actually tell them more of what they do and build up that value, find out about the prospects, like why they're there. And then the amount of people that came onto the first call, they're trying to one call close everybody. A lot of times the prospects were showing up because they just wanted an information session of like, I don't know what you do, because there was no additional information. There was no lead nurture. There was no like solid communication up to that call. So why would a prospect be willing to fork over $7,500 out of the blue after just seeing a Facebook ad and talking to you for 30 minutes? And they were getting frustrated why they weren't closing deals and why they had all this money sitting in the pipeline they couldn't tap into it.
It's so frustrating. It bothers me. Like, I'm hearing you say this, it actually irritates me a little bit.
Yes, very much.
Companies don't see this. I just talked with a guy yesterday that gets on a call, and I recognized his last name, and I was like, I don't know. There's a lot of names that sound familiar. And he's like, I spoke to you like over a year ago. And I was like, really? It's like, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't know. And that was a reminder to me. I was like, man, I really jacked up the pipeline. Like, I didn't navigate this properly. And that was a reminder for me of like why it's so important. So like, listen, we'll always preach about what's right, but we always have to be reminded of going back to best practices. So I dropped the ball there. But what was really interesting on the other side where I didn't is that this was somebody that I followed up with, even though I forgot to put the notes in, which is why I didn't realize that I met with him, and I didn't mark it as a show, which is why I didn't realize that I had a meeting with him. But I called him like 46 times over the course of like the last, like, I think it was 8.5 months ago was when I met with him. And between
you're hammering him at least once a week then.
Yeah. So you have to realize like this is the follow-up is so powerful. And now he's like, the whole business model has changed. Like you guys are doing different things, and I want to see what you're doing and learn more. One of the voicemails you left me had me really interested in something, and it's so important, man. I mean, I can't even describe it. I listen to it and it burns my soul because I think about the opportunity I've missed for like with my own performance.
Yeah.
When we talk about it. So
I think that the reality is that a lot of businesses are in that situation. Because like we come from the sales background and we say, well, no, it can't be that bad. Well, I think we miss the boat because we have marketing and sales minds. Like, how can we acquire more people? How can we make sales, generate revenue? Most people get into business not because they love marketing and sales, but because they love the fulfillment aspect of it. They love coaching. Oh, I'm really good at X. I'm going to teach people how to do that. And so that's the route that they go. And they're just kind of Frankenstein and piecing together a little bit of this, a little bit of that when it comes to marketing and sales. And then they wonder why they can't generate any revenue and grow the business. They're fantastic at, the course that they created, the coaching that they do, or the service that they provide. But they don't understand how to consistently acquire clients. And I think that's
so true, dude.
Right. And so I think that's where I look at it as, okay, I know what my strengths are. Let's come in, let's build up these processes. So I've worked with clients who are doing $500,000 a month that wanted to scale it to $750,000 and $1 million a month. And I've also been brought in startups.
Like I have everyone hire Derek, please.
Someone that I'm working with. Yeah, they come in and said, okay, listen, we know that we're really good at this, but I want to build a sales department, and we have not even launched the product yet. So we're gonna pay you to come in, put in the systems into place, XYZ, help us hire, get everything structured out, so that when we do launch, I'm not gonna hire you 6 months down the road when we're up shit's creek. Like, let's get ahead of this now. So it worked on both ends of the spectrum of like the bigger teams that are scaling, the middle teams that are doing 50 to 70K a month that want to get to 100, and then those startups who are just looking to get off the ground on the right foot.
I value this so much because it's where I drop the ball the most. I love sales. I'm the guy that loves actually selling. Mm-hmm. The fulfillment part for me, it was never the fun part ever. Like even when I was in college, in my first small business where I was just training people and everyone wanted to hire me to train them. I actually made a lot of money in college for someone that was a full-time student, just training other students that didn't have money. People were like paying me with like whatever money their parents were giving them for their meal plans, like for food. If they didn't have jobs, they were using that because they actually wanted to get in shape and they're paying me for it. So it's just really funny. in retrospect that kids would do that, but they did. And I like training people. I have a friend of mine that I did a little bit of business with, and he owns a training studio in New Rochelle, New York. Shout out to Absolute Training, which is no longer Absolute Training, but they just rebranded. It's Alta Fit. So shout out to Alta Fit. Andrew was in my wedding. He's a great friend of mine. He was on the phone with me in 2017. I'll never forget. I'm standing in a loft that I lived in Philadelphia, and he's like, we're having a conversation about business. He goes, Nick, he's like, your skill set was never training people. It kind of hurt a little bit. I don't even know if he remembers this. I hope he does. He said, your skill set was always getting people to do what was right for them. Like, people just believed in you. And I was like, man, you're right. Because I was in a sales role and I was explaining to him how much fun I was having getting people into a program that knew that was going to change their life.
Yeah.
And the reason for me that it's better is because for two things. Number one, I enjoy that conversation. I really do. I love sales. It's not that I don't like the fulfillment. I'm just not great at it. And I'm not detail oriented. I'm just not. And if you're fulfilling anything, you have to be very detail oriented. And that's something I try to improve on. I have all these hacks on how to be detail oriented. I take more notes than people. I have reminders on my desktop. I have like triple reminders. I put them in my notes on my phone. I put them on my calendar. I put them in the CRM. I have to quadruple bulletproof things because that's just the way it is. If my wife asks me to go to the store to pick up bread and ground beef, I'll go in there and I'll get cereal, I'll get eggs, bacon, yeah, and I'll call 3 times to make sure that I didn't forget the things she asked me to get, which typically are in my cart.
Yeah.
It's just, if I'm not completely like systematized from that standpoint, I'm just not the best at fulfilling stuff. I'm really good on the sales side. And that one conversation shifted my mindset to, well, why do I have to be responsible for filling? Even if I own a business, right? I could be the delegator. I could be the visionary, which is essentially every business owner in the beginning, you have to fulfill, but you're eventually the visionary and the one running it.
Right.
So that's a lot of my skill set is sales and being a visionary. I'm not good at fulfilling stuff. So I stopped focusing on it. It's not that I don't want to improve there because I need to for the sake of just sales management and whatever it is that I'm doing. But the details are it's just not my thing. And it's so important to acknowledge that, because the second that you realize that you're missing out on opportunity, or you're missing the opportunity for your current clients, which is the same thing, just in a different department of what you're talking about, you're dead in the water. Like once you understand that and you acknowledge it, you realize how much better you could be doing just by doing the basics right. It's not even a micro step. It's a macro step. This stuff needs to be done from the very beginning. So if you have a startup, get it done in the very beginning. It's the most important thing. You'll learn how to sell. Forget being really good at sales. Just get your process set up first and let that function, right? Yeah. Let that function be there.
And on the fulfillment front, I think that there are certain things that you're probably very good at on a fulfillment side of things, right? I don't think like fulfillment as a whole is weak. I'm sure if someone said, Nick, will you train me to sell? And I want coaching calls from you, and you got to sit.
Yeah, no, I could do that
and work through that. I think you'd probably be okay.
I have to stick within my wheelhouse, right? So, and I did that at Gym Launch, right? I did the boiler room. I was on the coaching team, and all of that I can absolutely 100% do.
I said, hey, write me a course from top to bottom, and I need the fine details of every little video script that you're going to write.
Yeah, take me off.
Forget about it. Yeah, exactly. And so like that's what I look at too, is when we're fulfilling, like where are my strengths and where are my weaknesses? Do I like building out and writing lead nurture sequences? Not particularly, but I know the formula that should go, so I can kind of scale them quickly and get them done. Ideally, I would love to teach someone to do that who is very, oriented in that sense of being able to write and understand it, so I can pass that off. Because where I get the most joy is I'm on these coaching calls. I'm working either with the executives of the company, the directors of the company, the sales team themselves, and we're doing kind of the boiler room training and all that fun stuff. And they're going, that makes sense. I get it now. I get it now. I get it now. So there's a little bit of sense of fulfillment, and then they go and apply it, and I get a Slack message, dings my phone, and they're like, hey, I used exactly what we said, and they closed on the spot. They're so happy. They're excited. I got a paid in full out of it. And it's like, yes, that in itself is what really drives me to continue to want to do it, is seeing that growth and seeing that transformation. It kind of goes back to why I started in fitness. I love seeing people transform and change, and they go, I understand it now, and I'm seeing the results, and it feels good.
Yeah.
It's just, to me, on the business side of things, it's just at a much larger scale, at least monetarily and financially.
Do you feel like you're selling when you sell now?
No, I don't. I still enjoy sales. I like getting on a call and selling or role playing with people and things like that. I find it to be fun. It's just a good conversation, and being able to, we talked about it earlier, getting people out of their own way and having them feel empowered to make a decision. And so I think that's the biggest thing, and the biggest difference I see between like high performing salespeople, especially nowadays where the consumer, I feel, is way more informed than they probably ever have been, versus the lower performing people. The lower performing people are telling their prospects what they should do. You're going to do this. Well, we're going to do it like this. We're going to do it like this. And it's just like, it feels very cookie cutter. I'm trying to
you'll get people, but you're not going to get who you could get.
That's right. And you're trying to take this square peg and pound it into a round hole. And sometimes if you're strong enough or hit it hard enough, it will go through, but not all the time. And there's lots of resistance. It's very friction oriented in that sense. So like what we like to teach and what we really, kind of pride ourselves on is this collaborative sales method. We talk about, consulting, consultative sales and all this other jazz. Collaborative sales, where they feel like they're actually building out their solution with you, goes so much further than telling them what to do.
It does. Yeah. There's like I guess people call it gap selling now, which is a newer term, or solution selling. It's the same thing. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it stems from obviously not a lot of experience, which is fine. Everyone starts, I think, selling that way. And then the second thing is script reading. I think burn the scripts, right? This is like, I did a 8-minute monologue on the show. If you haven't heard it yet, go back, listen to the burn the scripts monologue. It's going to get right to the point of why I think that scripts put people into this box. So I'm just going to call it out. Like everyone in the high ticket space that's trying to streamline their sales process, your script sucks. Everybody uses the sof thing. It sucks. I guarantee it. Like if everyone thinks they're closing at 20% or 30%, it sucks. I'm sorry. All of the high ticket gurus of the world, your script sucks. You all use the same one and pass it around. And I'm not trying to talk.
So recycled.
I'm not trying to talk shit. It friggin' sucks.
It does.
It's not good. And anyone that's at a high level of sales, like not just like building I feel like I'm always shitting on the high ticket space. I'm not. I actually love it. And there's so much good that happens, but the script sucks and your sales process sucks. And you think you're good at sales, but you absolutely are not good at sales. Most of them are horrible. I've had calls sent to me from companies that are trying to poach me. And they're like, oh, listen to these calls. Like, could you do this? And I'm like, these calls suck. They're horrible. And I listen to other people that are way better than me at sales, that are in massive companies or like mid-level companies. And I just laugh. It's like, if anyone that had like a business that's, mid-market business and heard the scripts that are being passed around in the online space, they would literally laugh. So it's good for people. It's good for people that have never done sales, but the script is junk.
So where I come from,
junk.
I come from the camp of you have to write a good script so that your people know what they're going to be saying. And I like to use it as a training mechanism.
It's a training mechanism.
If I'm onboarding new people or we're revamping a sales process and we want to dial in specific language around, the product, the service, so that we don't sound like morons when we're trying to explain it, and goes back to our earlier conversation of like not overloading the prospects. That is without those boundaries, we can just go on and on and on and on and on and just, compound them with information, and it becomes confusing. So we write a script in terms of we're going to train. We're going to know exactly where we're at. We're going to know how we describe things. We're going to know how to answer certain questions. But then like once the call happens, you can use it as little bullet point frameworks to kind of keep your spot mentally if you want, but we are not glued to that. We are having a genuine, humanized, collaborative conversation. But we just know our key points so that we're uniformed and we're aligned in what we're saying. And like I said, we don't sound like idiots when we get on the phone because
or gimmicky.
Or gimmicky.
I hate the gimmick.
And so I guess I'll tie this in.
If you sound like you're selling wrong.
Oh, 100%.
That's why I asked you, do you feel like you're selling? I haven't felt like I've sold anything in a decade, and I've been in sales for more than a decade. And I know that I'm selling, but I never even feel that way. I forget sometimes that I'm selling because selling is about solving problems. And the only way you're going to solve problems is just by getting as much information that you can, not going through the agenda of like trying to persuade people. When you use that linear script, you're forcing a solution that may fit, but doesn't feel fit to the person because you're not listening to what their problems are.
Exactly.
It's like, oh no, like it's a framework. And then they're like, oh, you didn't follow this part of the script. That's why you didn't close it. And it's like anyone being taught that way that hopefully comes across this podcast, you should just leave that company because they're holding you back. Or you should say, hey, can we try it this way? And if they're open to it and your success is higher, good. the company has good leadership skills. They're going to lie to at least test something, right? But like that just bugs me. The gimmicks in the sales script and the scripting itself, and everyone using the same script. Oh, this person used it. It works. This person used it. It works. It works to a certain degree, and that's why the biggest problem in the high ticket space is prided on sales. I think the biggest problem and where they execute at the lowest level is sales. I think it's the lowest level of sales is
it's
high
probably
ticket
one of the
sales.
most important, like, because you're leaving massive amounts of revenue on the table. I would say fulfillment and client retention is probably number one, and the number two is going to be sales, right? Is like, because you can sell your face off, but if you can't keep anyone, your business isn't going to grow. So like, I think if you got to have if you can extend lifetime value of a client, like make that lifetime value super high, whether it's super high ticket on the front end and then they stay for a short period of time, or they stay for a long period of time and it's a little bit lower ticket, whatever it might be. I think that's the key to a successful business, is having high lifetime value and then being able to acquire clients consistently.
Dude, I have tried to have conversations with some of these people and they won't even have the conversation. And they're like, they're more successful than I am financially. It's just so interesting to see that their sales process is dog shit.
So on this note, the way that I guess a little shameless plug here, but more of a story to tie into this. The way that we go about with my consulting business, acquiring clients, because you asked me, like, do I feel like I sell now? Is we go through an external audit for free. And so there's a few other gurus out there that are offering sales audits. Schedule your sales audit, and it's a 45-minute call, because I've done these because I wanted to see what they were doing compared to what we were doing.
Yeah, it's good to do.
So I've scheduled it. I've gone through the call, and they ask you 10 to 12 questions. And they're like, oh, well, I see a few gaps here and there. To fix that, what we need to do is come into our coaching program, blah, 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 blah. And then they try to sell you some, $5,000.
Not even molded to the issue.
No, and it wasn't even close to like even feeling personable, like not even remotely
That's
close.
the next thing, hyper personability.
Following a shitty script, right?
Yep.
And just not doing it. So what we end up doing is that we go through a full external audit, and it's not a Nick, jump on a call and we can discuss what's going on. It's jump on a call so I can explain the audit to you. And at this point, we're going to enter your sales process through the top of your funnel, basically like a secret shopper.
Yep.
And so we put in our names, and then we document our entire experience over the next week or so. Speed of communication, quality of communication, how easy was it to schedule a call? We don't self-schedule our calls. We want to see if your outbound team is doing their job to get us to schedule. Now, we give up after about 48 hours of waiting. We'll go back in and self-schedule because we don't want the process to stop. But we'll give you like 24, 48 hour window to see if your team can get us scheduled. Once we're scheduled, how easy was it to schedule? What is the communication going up to that first call? Some teams run a 1-call process. Some teams run a 2-call, like a triage or a set call, then they go into their close call. We document everything, every little nuance. We break down your call frameworks. How good was the opening? How good was the discovery process? What was your presentation looking like? And then what was your sales follow-up like? We give you another 48 hours after we object and say, no, we're not going to buy today. How good is your team following up with us? And then we give you a full report. It's like 28 to 32 pages long of everything that we have found, segmented, broken out, scored out, with solutions on what we would do to fix it. And it's not like bland solutions. It's like detailed, like, hey, I would change this and say this instead, and we would use it this way. We describe it this way. I would implement this in terms of your patterns or your cadences. And
do you give them the reasons why too? Do you give them like, okay, not just here's the solution, this is what we would do in order to solve it, and this is the outcome that we perceive would be accomplished, but also here's why it works. Do you explain the why behind that?
Yeah. And so that's part of the solutions, is like we would recommend doing it this way so that, or because, and explain the methodology behind it. And in terms of just getting the prospect to be more bought in and feel more empowered and feel like they're supported and feel like they're heard. Because so many companies just want to sell their company. They just want to sell their product, but they're not looking to actually service or help. And so that's what we do. And we go through this entire process, and then we schedule another call. And the only way that you're able to get the report is get on a call with me so I can walk you through. I'm not just going to send it over to you and hope for the best.
Yeah, of course.
So that is our close call. We jump on and we walk through the entire process, top down. Here's what we found. Here's what we've changed. Asking questions to them if they understand, asking them if they have any questions for us. And so they get a full like verbal report on top of the written report. We send them the PDF afterwards. And on that call, we also make our proposals like, hey, if we want to work together, we decide a partnership makes the most sense. Here's a couple options that we're looking at: shorter term, longer term, intensive, more consulting, and just like, let me kind of be the guiding hand as opposed to being in the weeds. So that's kind of our sales and acquisition model.
I love it. And here's the thing, the more people are working with with you and the more invested they become in that, you have more rapport, more time, more of a relationship, right? There's more authenticity. You can come up with better solutions and they're more invested. This is why I don't like one call closes. Well, I'll nuance that just really quick. I don't want to get lost in it, but I think that the smaller the ticket is and the lower of revenue for that client, the easier it is to do a one call close. But the higher level professional, the higher level of revenue, the larger it gets and the bigger the organization is and the more complexities there are involved in that organization, the more calls that are absolutely necessary for that company. So your sales process, while it should be a process, should also have contingencies based on who's in front of you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're coming from a spot too of, I think a lot of companies probably in this consulting space or this fractional management space or whatever, they probably do some type of audit, but you have to pay to play. You have to pay to get that audit. And so I looked at it from a position of what can I do for free that other people would have to pay for so that they would actually, as a new guy doing this, at least give me a shot to show that there's a level of expertise, that I know what I'm doing, that, if you don't like it, worst case is that you get a full report on your sales process and you walk away with solutions that you can implement on your own.
Yeah.
Best case is that we decide to partner together in some manner and we build a relationship long term. And so that's where I'm coming from, is like just lead with massive amounts of value, be able to provide as much expertise up front as I possibly can. And then I also think that there's this law of reciprocity that comes with it too, where
that's why I like the whole time equation there. The more time you spend and the more invested they become, the more likely they are to close.
And they also get an insight in terms of what we're doing. That's another thing that I can't stand, like with these other sales audit calls that I have done with other companies, is that they don't fully know the scope of work they're about to perform until you buy. And then they have to go through this evaluation process of where are you at? Okay. And then you waste. So if I buy a 90-day package for somebody, I'm wasting the first 2 to 4 weeks on them trying to identify what actually needs to be worked on. Mm-hmm. And I'm only getting 60 days of builds and coaching and all this other stuff taken care of. So we want to take care of as much as we can on the front end externally to say, this is exactly what we're going to do on day one. Yeah. And then when we get inside, we can do the internal stuff. Like we're talking about the messy CRMs and the workflows and start analyzing their nurture processes and helping them set up better timing and better language to be used to get people to show up. So it really just takes a big week or two of work off of the plate so that we can get in and start getting them results a lot faster than some of these other audits and other consulting businesses can.
Time dimensional, how fast, like when do you want this solved by, how painful is it? So that's great, dude. I love the process. What you're doing is a game changer for, I think, most businesses that are starting out or that have existed for, 10, 12 years minimum, that maybe you're leaving a lot of money on the table. I think the small to mid-sized market's probably the biggest opportunity. Yeah. It's just easier to A, get in front of them, but B, they're the ones that are impacted the most by that. You get really large corporations or Fortune 500 companies. It's not that they can't improve. It's just getting in front of them is much more difficult. It takes a lot more time.
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
And a lot of their processes are more dialed in. It's just true. They've hired the best consultants in the world, or they have higher level people that, again, would laugh at some of the things being done at a quote unquote high level that you see. So it's just interesting, but I love it, dude. It's so relevant. You would enjoy the conversation that I'm going to have coming up next week. I should connect you with this gentleman because what you guys are doing is different, but similar. And I think that just the conversation is so similar in a sense of like what's valued from an opportunity standpoint for business. Everyone's just looking to get better at selling, but it is process oriented.
It's so process oriented. And I think you probably see this too across the marketplaces, like the last probably 5 years, 6 years, it was agencies galore, leads, market, right? And now it's taken a shift where it's like, teach you how to sell. And it's like
staffing.
Everyone's recruiting. Yeah. So recruiting and placement of closers and setters. We guarantee this. So,
yep.
But again,
we're all reading the same script, by the way. It's like just an iteration of the same script that
it's all recycled. But that was it. Like when the
shitty script.
When the online coaching space kind of erupted, a lot of the coaching courses and formats were just all recycled from, one or two of the creators of them. And it's the same thing in the marketing world. It's the same thing in copywriting. It's the same thing in sales. It's just a bunch of recycled garbage.
Well, dude, it's really easy to sell young business owners that are desperate for success. So let me watch companies sell higher level business owners through that same process with better marketing and operations using that script, because it won't work. Sorry.
No, it won't.
It's interesting. I always say that there's there's a lot of money in the world because there's a lot of suckers.
I like that.
So it's easy to make money. It just boils down to, what do you want your business model to be based from? Do you want to work with people that are just buying out of desperation? Here's the thing. Those people need they need help. So I'm not dissing it, but you have to understand that the process that you have, or where you're starting with, because all of these models eventually grow into working with bigger companies. Any of the agencies or coaching programs that are brilliant usually started with smaller level clients, and now are growing to trying to capture larger companies. From a scalability standpoint, you want to have higher level value, less clients, less time involved, right? More cash flow. This is essentially one of the ways that you scale a business, but they get stuck when they make that transition and they get rid of salespeople, and they think that it's the salespeople, but really what they are not understanding is that their sales process sucks.
They said their salespeople were failure.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy. I don't understand why people have not seen this. The analogy that I think I used in the Burn the Scripts episode is a sports analogy. So if you and I are in the same sport, this is just a basic, I'm shifting a little bit here. So I apologize to everyone that I'm just like kind of all over the place. But if we're on the basketball court together and you're the star player and you're covered, doubled, tripled, and that's the play call from an inbounding play, and I'm the point guard, maybe you're the center, am I going to pass you the ball?
More than likely not.
Yeah, I could though. I could if it's in the script and that's what I have to do. But 9 times out of 10, you're either gonna the ball's gonna be intercepted, or you're not gonna be able to go anywhere with the ball, or you're gonna step out of bounds, or you're gonna take a ridiculous shot that's not gonna go in. Right. So you have to realize that when you can't pass the ball, you have to be able to call an audible. You have to be able to pass to someone else. You have to be able to be dynamic on the floor. Sales is dynamic. This is what I hate about how linear that process is from following any script or the scripts that you hear. Yeah, it's wild. It's a super interesting thing. I'm curious on your thoughts to what you think about AI right now, because AI is very script driven, even like generative or conversational AI. I can still pick it out. When I get messages on my phone, no matter how good it is.
It's comical though. Like you can tell. And then there's certain language patterns or words that AI tends to use that people for some reason don't clean up. I had this conversation with my mom the other day about this, and she's like, "Oh, I can tell when it's Chat GPT because they always say something like foster a relationship." She goes, "Nobody says foster a relationship. AI does, and people are just copying and pasting and sending it."
Yeah, it's interesting. I do think eventually it's going to be able to take over non-phone or even phone. Like if it's face-to-face, I think we're still off for a little while. It's going to get better, but I'm talking right now, like 2023, I still don't think it's good enough to lean on that as like your main tool. I think it can be used, but the hyper-personalization of a sales process, I think, is what inches that margin of success versus someone that isn't using that. So you can streamline that as a process, but operational efficiencies alone are a zero-sum game. And you look at replication, I talk a lot about replication on like Me Too companies is what I call them. So when you join the Marines, I have a bunch of friends that are Marines. I'm not, but they would laugh because you get this big signing bonus, right? When you're 18 and everyone goes out and gets a car at 18. You get the signing bonus. Before you go to Camp Lejeune, you go out and you buy a Mustang. That's what everyone does. And you go to Camp Lejeune and everyone says, "Oh yeah, like what kind of car do you have?" And they're like, "A Mustang." And they go, "Oh, me too." And so what happens is, even though the newest Mustang Cobra might be like a super sexy car and a super special or unique car on the road to everyone that's just driving around, typically it's not special anymore because everyone that's accumulated in your spot is also doing that thing. And so there's no differentiation. And this is another piece to the sales process. It's an absolute mistake, is that every model is a Me Too model. Every script is a Me Too script. Every business is a Me Too business. So yeah, you can do those things. And I don't think that you should stop or have any ambition based on what I'm saying. Don't let me deflect you, but you have to find a way to be completely different. I think hyper personalization is one of those things. So rather than relying on just the operational efficiencies and being a Me Too business, what if you just picked up the phone and called them and you said something that's hyper specific that AI just can't pick up on? That's going to hold so much more value, and the time that you spend doing that may be more robust, and you may have to hire out for that or whatever, but you're going to connect with those clients so much more than conversational or generative AI.
100%.
Now, maybe not in the future. Maybe the AI can pull this, a marketing audit or a sales audit, and it can search the web and it can do all these things and it can act like a person, but it can't do that right now.
Not
so
yet.
In the meantime, I just think that everyone is just building a Me Too business. I like what you're doing because it's not a Me Too business. It's different. You're putting that personal touch. They're doing an audit and you're a part of that process, and you can provide very specific insight and feedback related to your actual experience with them. That's not something that AI can do. So yeah, anyway, besides the Me Too thing, I just think AI is now becoming the next Me Too movement of business.
Oh yeah, 100%. And so here's how I use AI, because I know, and me personally, awful at sales notes, terrible, and updating the CRM and all that other jazz. I am your typical sales guy, brutal at it. And so I needed to find a way to provide really good detailed notes to the onboarding team for the client success team and onboarding, or I'm sorry, I said onboarding, but making sure that handoff is really, really smooth. And so I opened up ChatGPT and I have a conversation going that's called sales notes. And I gave it this pretty detailed prompt of like, hey, I'm going to be sending you sales notes. I'm going to need you to categorize it in these particular categories. I listed out everything that I need, bullet point fashion, so that onboarding can go smooth. So just give like the reasoning behind it, what I'm looking for, in what format. And so we save it as that conversation prompt. And then, so I get off the call, hang up the phone. I have some of my chicken scratch notes in my legal pad. I'm still a pen and paper guy. I'll grab my phone. I'll pull up.
This is how I take notes.
That's it.
Everyone's like, how do you read that? Sometimes I can't, but
I have yellow legal pads all over the place.
Yeah.
And so I'll grab my phone, pull up ChatGPT, and boom, voice to text. And I'll read the notes that I have, and I'll recap the entire call, everything that stuck out to me, the smallest little finer details, all the way to the biggest pain points and everything. And I'll just brain dump everything that we just talked about for the last 30 to 45 minutes. And it doesn't matter if it's in order. It doesn't matter if it's grammatically correct. It doesn't matter if you've used punctuation or not. And I just blah, 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 blah. And it takes me 2 minutes to recap the entire call. I press send, ChatGPT sorts it all out, categorizes it, nice bullet point notes, copy, paste in the CRM, done. And so that has saved me tons of time and tons of brain space, just from an organizational admin standpoint.
Consider it stolen. I'm using it. I need that personally. Yeah, that's great. Absolutely do love that. Yeah, man. So we're running out of time here. So just to wrap this up, that's a great way to end it. What's one piece of, what do you think the biggest piece of advice that you could give small businesses that are running into the problem that you saw? What's one thing that you could say to conclude everything here today?
That's a really good question. There's a lot of answers coming to my mind. I think the biggest thing is think about it from the buyer's perspective. And the reason why I say that is that we're always discussing, how can I sell better? What zingers can I use? What language mechanics? How can I close them and objection overcomes? How come my show rate isn't very high? It's because you're thinking of it from a sales perspective.
Absolutely.
You need to start thinking of it from a buying perspective. How does the prospect receive what you're sending them? How do they feel? What type of emotions are you stirring up by not sending them anything? They feel like you don't care, right? So think of it, if you were a buyer, how would you want to be treated? And once you start thinking of it from the buyer's perspective, your entire sales process will change.
Love it. Love it. It's so true. It's everything that we talked about today, right? Don't feel like you're selling. Think about it from the buyer perspective. Dude, that's just such a great reminder for everyone listening. Well, listen, I appreciate you. Where can people find the business again? Tell them the site, where they can find you online, all that stuff.
Yeah, so really simple. Website is Rapid, so RAPID, sales.io. And if you want to check out more about that free audit, just go to rapidsales.io/free, and it'll take you to our little landing page there. I got a video explainer that kind of walks through the entire process.
What do you have to lose?
Nothing to lose.
You have to lose, guys. Let's go. I'm going to do it. We're going to connect. This is great, man. Again, thanks for being on the show, and I appreciate your time, and I'll talk to you soon.
Nick, I appreciate it. Thanks, man.